The civilizations of the Incas. Introduction. The so-called Incas were originally a migrating group who settled in Cusco Valley in the 1100s and eventually became a powerful empire in the Andes of South America. First, they wandered from their original caves, and according to myth, they found a group of supernatural humans who became their rulers. Next, their city grew into a city-state, and before long, they began conquering neighboring lands and became a gigantic empire. Finally, Cusco became an amazing city with aqueducts and all. They maintained this huge empire in very amazing ways. Soon, they had the largest empire in South America and the most powerful until the Spanish soldiers came in the mid-1500s and ultimately upset the complex empire. However, today there are still Inca people who remember and practice their traditions and many ruins of cities and estates. With their help, we are able to keep learning about their amazing civilization. Origins. It is said, according to myth, that around 1150 CE, there were 3 giant caves. The main one called Capac Toko, and the other 2 ones called Naras Toko and Sutik Toko. 4 powerful brothers and 4 powerful sisters came out of Capac Toko, and the other groups of people came out of the other caves. The siblings were said to be the children of the sun deity, called Inti. These people were the ancestors of the Incas. The 8 siblings seemed supernatural, so they became their rulers. They traveled looking for a sacred land. This is a picture of Manco Capac here. It was said that Manco Capac, one of the brothers, had a golden staff that he would throw it into the ground. If it disappeared, then that was a sacred land they must settle. Again and again, he would throw the staff, but it would never disappear until he threw it into the Cusco Valley, where it disappeared, so they knew this was the land they must settle. The founding of Cusco. Manco Capac told them to start a small city where the staff had landed and disappeared. They constructed a central square with temples and palaces, a palace for Manco Capac and his siblings, a giant temple for Inti, and another one for Inti's wife, Mama Kila, large roads, commoners' houses, and other city buildings. When they traveled into the valley, many of the native inhabitants of the valley did not want them there. So the Cuscos formed a small part-time army to defend themselves from the original inhabitants. By the time Manco Capac died of natural causes, the native people were either pushed out of the valley or settled down and paid a tax to the new city-state. They called their city Cusco. Hurrian Dynasty, 12,000 to 1350 CE. History and real life. Note, the rulers had many descriptive names with meanings, often depicted their power. For example, Capac meant warlord, Sinchi meant leader, Yupanqui meant with honor. I later list the definitions of their names. Hurrian Dynasty from 12,000 to 1350 CE. After Manco Capac got old, it was decided that his oldest son, Sinchi Roca, would be the next ruler. In his reign, Sinchi Roca ordered a census and started a system of representatives that would later turn into despotic administration. He also adopted terrace farming and imported lots of soil with the help of their llamas. The population of Cusco got much bigger, so they added aqueducts and bigger roads. Like his father, he had a symbolic marriage with his sister. The sister, Mamakura, was like a queen and had the position, was later called the Koya, which means female ruler. The male ruler would have many concubines, which are like other wives. After Sinchi Roca died, one of his sons, Lokwi Yupanqui, succeeded him. This was decided in a festival called Huarachicui by a series of religious tests of strength and understanding. In his reign, they started a large market in Cusco and many other social systems. Cusco. Some say as far away as the Lake Titicaca Basin. His successor was Capac Yupanqui, pictured on the right, and who also conquered far away, expanding the vassals. Henan Dynasty. From 1350 to 1530. Capac Yupanqui's chosen heir was a son named Quispi Yupanqui. However, Quispi Yupanqui was not considered a fit ruler by the people, so the Henan part of Cusco rebelled and made Inca Roca. Name means Inca generous / generous Inca. The successor and next ruler who founded a new dynasty, the dynasty of the Henan. Inca Roca's son and successor, Yahuarahuaca, was a powerful warlord, and his successor, Viracocha, the name of God, began turning all of the vassals into more fully controlled provinces. However, this got the attention of the Chancas, another growing empire in the area. They soon raised a huge army, the Chancas did, of 40,000 to attack Cusco. Viracocha and his many palace staff, nobles, and even commoners went to the mountain estate of Hunchoy, Cusco. One of his sons, named Cusi Inca, stayed in Cusco with most of the army, vowing to protect it. They battled the Chancas, and in the end, the Incas won. Soon Viracocha died, and Cusi Inca Yupanqui became the next ruler. The rulers were called Sapan Incas from then on. Cusi Inca Yupanqui changed his name to Pachacuti, which means Earthshaker Inca Yupanqui, and he was coronated Sapan Inca. Then he proclaimed he was founding Tawantinsuyu, or the Inca Empire. After this, it was a brilliant empire, constantly expanding and by conquering. The next two Sapan Incas were Topa Inca Yupanqui, noble Inca with honor, and Guayana Capac, boy warlord. Government and religion. Tawantinsuyu meant 4 quarters, referring to the 4 suyus, or divisions, of the empire. To the north of Cusco was Chinchai Suyu, Kusu Suyu to the west, Anti Suyu to the east, and Koala Suyu to the south. In each Suyu there were Wamani, a kind of province or state. Then there was decimal administration. We do not know much about it, but it consisted of groups of 10 with an elected leader. They might have councils to make decisions, but if it was a bigger problem, then the leader might meet with 5 or other leaders of 10, with the help of another leader elected by all 50 people. That person might meet with another leader of 50, and they would have a representative of 100. This would go on till 10,000. However, the leaders of over 100 people would not have very much power and would be mostly used as representatives, doing things like censuses and labor assignments. And the leaders over the smaller groups would have more direct influence. For taxes, everyone over 15 would have to do a formal job that would benefit the community. This was called mit'a and was an important part of decimal administration. For men, this might be becoming a part-time soldier. Just get this focused a little bit better. Okay, to conquer, they would try sending a series of messengers who would try to convince leaders of the places they want to conquer that they should join Tawantinsuyu. They would give them gifts and trade. However, usually the leaders would decide they did not want to, so the Tawantinsuyu army would be called for military conquest. Because of the Mita system, there could sometimes be 200,000 people in the army. It was very powerful because they had people from all terrains, and they were in perfect formation and had good organizational tactics. The Incas did not write on paper like we do. Instead, they used quipu, pictured here on the left, which is a diagram of strings and beads that can be used in censuses and recording. And let's see. And the Inca calendar was similar to ours. It consisted of 12 months like us. Like the Aztecs and Maya, the teachers in Inca schools were actually Amaltacuna, a type of bard-like philosopher poet. However, unlike the Aztecs, it seems that some commoners did not get this formal education. Instead, they were taught by their parents and some local elders. Tawantinsuyu had a gigantic road system that was 40,000 kilometers, 25,000 miles long. The roads would be wide, often with aqueducts on the side, and paved with tunnels, ropes, bridges, furrows, walls, and causeways. On the sides, there were also resting places for armies, tambos, a kind of inn for travelers, they usually without staff, estates for different types of officials, colas, storages for food, water, and more things distributed when need, chasquihuases, stations for the chasqui messengers. The chasquis were relay messengers carrying quipu, verbal messages, and even items. They would run a few miles and then at a chasquihuases pass it on to another chasqui. And then another, and keep going until they reach the destination. Because of this, they could go for 240 kilometers, 150 miles per day. The Incas were very religious and worshipped a kind of pantheon or family of deities. All these deities seem to be related to nature. Here's a statue right here of a Inca deity. Let's see, so much light coming. The most important was probably Inti, who was literally the sun. The moon, Mamakila, was said to be Inti's wife, and also important. Similar to the Mesoamericans' belief in Tero, the Incas believed everything was an ecosystem. They also made large temples with beautiful stone walls. Though they themselves believed strongly in their religion, they are open to others and allowed conquered groups to keep practicing their original ones. Lisa, maybe right now people should ask questions, because here. Let's see. Cusco was always the capital of Tawantinsuyu. Here's a map of Cusco. Move it over. Here. It was divided into two parts, Hurin and Hanan. Hurin is on our kind of top left, I think, and Hanan is bottom right, I'm pretty sure. It was also divided into the four Suyus, which met in Cusco, with two rivers channeled through it. The roads were shaped like a puma in the center. This is where all of the Sapan Incas' palaces were. They surrounded the central square, which is, see if I can't, well, the central square is right that little spot. And surrounded the central square, and the palaces themselves were amazing. They went on almost forever, and they had lots of courtyards, though they were relatively flat. On one of the mountains overlooking the valley sits the amazing fortress of Sacsayhuaman. It is what's supposed to be the head of the puma, and the central area was supposed to look like a puma, if you will. You see, kind of crouching.
I don't really see that.
Well, go figure. It had three giant walls and used to have many rooms and towers at the top. You can see its ruins today. The Sapan Inca. Imagine someone who was believed to be a descendant of the gods. Imagine the Sapan Inca and the Koya, whose bare feet never touched the ground. Every object they touched went through a fire ceremony, which some of it was being burned. When they were carried through around in huge litters, held on the shoulders of 20 or 40 rocas, carriers, and sweepers, sweeping anything dirty out of the road. This is a procession, a small one. There were announcers and many other nobles in the procession. They lived in huge palaces with beautiful courtyards, fresh water and aqueducts, beautiful with murals on the walls and perfectly shaped stone walls. The Incas were famous for these palaces were thousands of feet long. They would have thousands of servants helping them with everything. Nearby the palaces would be armories, many storehouses, some with tribute collections, and gigantic governmental buildings. The children of the Sapaninka would have many servants and live in the royal palaces. Often when the prince got older, he would go out as a military general and conquer new areas. When the Sapaninka and his entourage were traveling, everyone near the road had to take off their shoes, carry something heavy, do a special bow. Often they would have to kiss the Sapaninka's hands or feet while he looked away. Life of a commoner. This is Inca food. Sorry that it's so bright, so we can't see the The Inca staple food were corn, beans, and potatoes. Because they lived high up in the mountains, it was not easy to grow many foods. The easiest foods to grow in the mountains were things like potatoes. A lot of their food had potatoes or corn, and commoner meals were just consisted of simple things like such as tortillas with quinoa and corn and various salads. This is a pretty much common meal, but more today. A lot of food had potatoes or corn. A lot of food had potatoes. Farmers did not eat as much meat as we do because their domesticated animals would not be eaten until they were old or die naturally. Also in the cities, it was not easy to hunt because they had to go far away into the forest. However, nobles had hunting parties because they could be carried in their litters quickly and go in long processions and hunting parties. The animals that the so-called Incas domesticated were camelids such as llamas, alpacas, guanacos, and vicuñas, occasionally koi, and vizcaya rabbits. They did not have cows, horses, sheep, goats, or anything like that. They also did not have wheat or rice. Almost all of their agriculture was on mountain terraces, which are like stairs, so that they would have more land than just farming on a mountainside. Like all indigenous Americans, they sold everything in markets. These markets were open air, never within a building. They traded everything, and there was a huge market in Cusco, like the Mexica Tenochtitlan. They made many crafts, such as statues, carvings, and their famous textiles. Their textiles were very beautiful. For clothing, men could wear loincloths and large tunics. Women wore similar dresses that looked like tunics. Nobles like the Sapaninka would wear beautiful clothing, such as huge capes and beautifully embroidered tunics with lots of golden and silver body plates and gigantic headdresses. Conclusion. All these complex parts and practices work together to form an amazing and gigantic empire, which worked brilliantly for about a century. However, when the Spanish soldiers came, everything got a bit disorganized, and eventually the empire was destroyed. Though the empire got destroyed, the people didn't at all. Today, many people still speak their language, Quechua, practice traditions, remember myths and history, and many things that the Incas did. Cusco is still there, though now it is called Cusco, and many of the states and city-states ruins are still there today, such as Machu Picchu, which you may know about. History has many different versions of what exactly happened, but we're gradually discovering more of the truth about the amazing Inca civilization. There we are.